Hey everybody, remember Flop TV, the 1-hour online video version of the Flophouse podcast that we produced last year? Well, I'm excited to tell you it is coming back. Flop TV 2, the sequel, will be broadcasting live to your computer screen the first Saturday of every month from September through February. We're talking only about sequels this season. RoboCop 2, Breakin' 2, Highlander 2, Caddyshack 2, Ski School 2, and Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. It's going to be all new jokes, all new presentations, movies we have never covered on the show before, all in a tight 1-hour-ish package. Can't join us the night of the show? That's okay. The videos for every episode will remain online through the end of February, so you can binge them or dole them out as you prefer. So that's Flop TV 2, the first Saturday of every month from September through February. For tickets and more information, go to flophousepodcast.com/events. Again, that's flophousepodcast.com/events. Flop TV 2, everything you loved about Flop TV, but again.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another Flophouse Mini. I'm Dan McCoy.
I'm Stuart Wellington.
And I'm Elliot Kalin. I'm floating away. Sorry,
Oh, no.
guys.
Let him go.
Well, there he goes.
I turn
Well,
around,
it's
but I don't know how it works.
You know, I always thought Elliot was full of hot air.
Okay, I'm coming back down now to face these
deflated.
allegations.
Yeah. Okay, well, today we have our special guest, Cristina Cacioppo, Director of Programming at Nighthawk.
I'm only laughing
Wow.
because Dan had this told to him a moment ago and then had it reminded to him a moment ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could hear and you could see in my face that I had already forgotten the specifics of the title, and that is one of the many short-term memory problems.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
belong to me.
What I was imagining was you as a pith-helmeted explorer with a machete hacking your way through all the commercial jingles and TV theme songs you do remember instantly to get to the information that you just found out and needed to say.
Yeah, he got through that intro like he had a driving instructor right off his shoulder.
Anyway, welcome, Cristina. We haven't even let you say anything. Welcome. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. Now, regular listeners, of course, will know that we've referenced you a lot. You've been a friend to the pod for a long time. As we said, you're a programmer at Nighthawk. You've programmed movies a lot of different places, but we're going to start off with personal history. And by personal history, I mean personal history with the Flophouse.
Okay. Tell me about your history, but how it's important to me.
How it affects the three of us particularly. Cristina, for anyone who is not part of the New York film scene, and especially the New York film theater revival scene and revival screening scene, you won't know that Cristina is a very important kind of staple, linchpin, kind of central figure in I feel like that New York scene, and has been for many years. So I'm very excited to have her today.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
Yes, and a very important place in Flophouse lore because
Keep bringing it back to the Flophouse. There's
Well,
no
that's
compliment
how
that can't be tied back.
Yeah, if
to
we're
the
talking about
Flophouse.
New York,
I mean-
New York film stuff, we're like what? Like, did you have a Kim's Video membership card? That's how you check somebody's film bona fides in New York?
Elliot, you saw my list of questions. You know how they're arranged.
That's true. That's true. There will be
needling me.
non-Flophouse questions later. Yeah.
Eventually, we'll get to the other stuff. But I just wanted to acknowledge that Cristina was the first person to sort of get us to do live shows. I think that she programmed us first. And I was going to ask, can you remember which was the very first one and how it came about?
Why?
Well, I did have to study and cheat a little bit. So luckily, because I was like, do I remember this? Was the first one? Don't tell her it's me. But luckily I have access to my old 92 I Tribeca calendar.
Oh, cool.
And also spoke to Matt and Ksenia. So yes, I think our first thing was Twin Sitters.
Oh,
Does
right.
that sound
Okay,
right?
right.
to you guys?
Banger.
I think you're right.
And I thinking about how it came about. Elliot, we had your series, and
That was what? Closely watched films?
Closely watched
Close Watch
films.
Films. I had met Cristina because 92 I Tribeca, which used to be a downtown film screening space and live show space. Cristina, you were the programmer there, and I'm trying to remember who matched us up. But I went over and I met you. We had kind of like a cold meeting just about like
Yeah, you had
me hosting
pitched me
Cristina.
on that series, and I really liked the idea of it. And so we had started out that way. And I think at the same time, Matt and Ksenia were doing I Love Bad Movies.
Yep.
Yes.
And so, you guys can fill in the gaps for me from your point of view, because I sort of remember maybe talking to Matt and Ksenia first. Like, I don't really even remember when I met Dan and Stuart,
Because they're eternal. They just
Well, yeah, I've always been with you.
Let's introduce the listening audience to Matt and Ksenia,
Yes,
these characters who have been mentioned. Matt
Carmen.
Part
is man,
known,
part car.
is known to people, but not known to people who listen to the show as our man behind the scenes. You have enjoyed his work without knowing it, probably because he does a lot of tech stuff for us. He helps assemble like the presentation decks for our live show. He runs Flop TV.
any
He
streaming
runs
show
live.
we've ever done where we're doing
Yeah.
live over the internet, Matt is heavily involved in the tech. And his wife, Ksenia Roche, who I would have introduced first because I've known her longer. She's one of my oldest friends. Is also an incredibly valued member of the kind of this Flophouse adjacent, let's say, kind of New York film community. And the two of them, they put out a zine called I Love Bad Movies for quite some time, and they would do bad movie screenings also. And so they're people who have had a big impact on this podcast in particular, even if the audience is not fully aware of them.
I thought you were going to say like incredibly important to sort of like the nerd world in New York because that's true.
I decided to take a page out of the Dan McCoy playbook and only relate things to the Flophouse and the Flophouse's history.
Well, they ran the Brooklyn Zine Fest for several years. Creative folks.
Wait, are zines for nerds, Dan? Is that what you're implying?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not even.
Zines used to be for cool people, but now they're for nerds. Yeah.
I don't use that pejoratively anyway.
From your point of view, do you remember how the show got pitched? I feel like because Twin Sitters seem to really be kind of Matt and Ksenia's thing.
It's their bag, baby.
So yeah, what do you guys remember about that? Because I just remember it was like, yeah, I was into the idea because we talked about doing this kind of show because you did do the live commentary right off the bat. Yeah. So the idea was that we were going to do this show that would have this sort of presentation element, which I think ended up being kind of babysitter related, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then you guys were going to do the commentary. What are your memories?
Well, I mean, it was a riff show, like you say. Like our early shows were usually us cracking wise over the movies,
which is hard.
Mystery Science Theater or riff tracks.
Well, you weren't scripting it, right? Like
you
were being off the cuff. Yeah.
And we put that aside partly because it was hard, but partly because when we started touring with shows, like when you do that kind of show, you have to clear the screening. Like you have to do it with a movie theater usually who has a programmer like you who can do all this stuff for us. And we wanted to be more mobile than that. I don't know.
It was in what, like a 70-seat
really
theater?
Small, yeah. And the thing that they reminded me of, because I forgot that we eventually moved to that big, not really movie theater space
for Jaws the Revenge.
Yeah,
that's
the
right.
last show. And that the joke was that because that capacity, I think we maybe could seat like 150 or something. And the joke was that it sold out before an event we had with Peter Bogdanovich. Do you remember that?
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Oh, man. There's a long history of the Flophouse fucking over Peter Bogdanovich.
We're really the ones who have been wrecking his life for decades. Yeah, sure.
I feel like you guys met someone at the Jaws. Was it Adam Rifkin? Was that?
It was Adam Resnick.
Adam
Resnick.
I get those names mixed up.
The co-creator of Get a Life and someone who was a very important kind of like comedy writer figure for me.
Yeah, Cabin Boy. We had hosted him for Cabin Boy. So he had brought maybe his daughter?
His daughter was a listener.
And
I think he wasn't familiar with the show. And it was really cool to meet him at first. And he was like, that was a really funny show. You guys obviously put a lot of thought into the jokes. And I want to be like, no, we didn't. But
barely.
That was a very exciting moment for me.
We did a couple of how many shows? We did like 2 or 3 shows in that smaller venue because we did
maybe even more because I was looking it over, and so it was Twin Sitters. It was 12 rounds.
I forgot we did 12 rounds.
Point.
Yeah.
Rats. We did Quiet
Don't tell
Cool.
her it's me. Quiet Cool. Yeah, so it might have been like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
in that
Man,
space.
that was fun.
And then we moved up to the big leagues, the bigger room in the same.
And then the venue closed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do have to
unfortunately.
say one of the things that I remember most about when we made the move to the larger venue there was every time we did one of those shows, I was bartending, and for me to do a show, I would have to take a night off work. And that's not like I'm still getting paid, I'm getting sick pay. It's like, no, I'm just not making money that
Yeah,
night.
you were taking a financial hit to do
Yes.
this.
Yeah, because I think 92i never let us pay anybody anything. So,
But I feel
sorry
like
about that.
I feel like that was I could be wrong, but I feel like that might have been the first time where I'm like, oh no, I basically made the same amount of money I might have made if I'd been bartending for 8 hours that night, which was, I mean, as a performer is huge. That's a huge deal to be like,
Yeah.
I'm making more doing this than my day, like literally than my day job in this thing.
Yeah.
was-
Although your day job was technically a night job.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Makes you think, right?
Well, you were
Yeah, it's like that whole thing. Why do we park on a driveway, but we drive on a parkway? You know.
you referred to this kind of in passing, but
What?
oh God, he broke his brain. But I wanted to ask more outright. You know, you talked about the Bogdanovich thing. I know that when Elliot had closely watched films, he would complain about like, I can't get people to come to this good movie, but they'll come out in droves for a bad movie. Does that ever frustrate you as a programmer, or what are your feelings on those things?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a funny thing because it's like I know there are audiences for more intense stuff, like other venues. I think I think the thing is when you try to do so many things, like you get known for one thing and then not the other. So like when you're a venue that only shows experimental film, like you're probably getting your audience. But if you try to do a lot of different types of things,
Yeah.
Experimental film like what, like Memento or Forrest Gump or something?
yes,
Yeah, experimental. It's really
shown
playing on
together
things.
with one soundtrack over the other.
Oh,
Oh
shit.
wow.
Yeah.
Slowed down so it takes 24
yeah.
hours to watch the entire movie. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think that it's definitely always been a thing where it's like the movie that you sort of covet and love the most, like less people are going to come out for it. And it was a lesson I learned very early into doing all this. And I kind of learned to just stop having my heart broken by stuff like that. Because sometimes there's a good win, and it's not always that way. So yeah, I think that when that happens is kind of frustrating, but it's just about kind of like building your audience and knowing who you're reaching and having some consistency,
This is totally off topic, but sorry. Speaking of 24-hour movies, did you happen to see the Letterboxd Paul Schrader review where he talked about he went to see The Clock and he's like, I decided I'm going to stay here until I see one of my own movies in here. And he was rewarded after 45 minutes. He finally saw American Gigolo, so that's pretty good.
That's really good. I mean,
Yeah.
the Clock is for anyone who's not familiar with it, it is a 24-hour movie made up of scenes from other movies where you see the time. And it is timed so that when you are watching it, it functions as a clock. So like you are watching it and you're like, oh, it's 10:11 a.m. and you look on screen and it's the clock say 10:11 a.m. in whatever scene. And I remember when that finally made it to New York, it was playing at Lincoln Center for a certain amount of time. I was like, I went to see like an hour and a half of it before work one day, and I was like, if I was in college right now, I would stay for 24 hours. I'd watch this whole thing. I want to see all the nighttime clock scenes, but it's hard to do. I have to find someone has to send me a bootleg of it so I can watch it in chunks at the wrong times.
Yeah.
So I'm going to close out this solipsistic section of it with the most self-serving question in the section.
Yeah. I wanna...
How are we to work with? You kept inviting us back. Was it just because we put butts in seats and you're like, oi, these three goobers? Or did you, what's our goober quotient?
GQ.
Well, it's funny because, you kindly sent me these questions in advance so that I could be prepared. And I feel like this should have been one that you just like sprung on me, like put me on the spot. No, of course you
like
were
a true
wonderful
programmer,
to work.
making
of
the
course
show better.
You were wonderful to work with. Like, there was, it's not like there were demands or drama or anything. Like it was always like, we would maybe have a little bit of a back and forth about what movie to do. But yeah, of course, like it was always an event that I looked forward to. Even once we moved over to Alamo, like, I was always really glad. I mean, you guys even, made it up to Yonkers, which
It
was
snowstormed
multiple
all the
times.
time.
yeah. So
That's right.
yeah,
After 92i closed, yeah, you were programming the Yonkers Alamo because there wasn't an Alamo in New York City yet, right?
Yeah. I got a little bait and switch, and then had to be in Yonkers
Yeah.
for 3 dark years that I try not to think about. But yeah, it was a very bright spot to be able to bring you guys up there, and then even continue into Brooklyn.
You organized that screening of Castle Freak.
Yeah, and I
where,
was thinking about
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah, Jonathan came up. And,
Because that was
he was
such-
an awesome guest.
Yeah, I mean, I drove him around. Like, I got him from the airport and brought him from Birmingham, Alabama. And yeah, I was thinking about that too, in addition to, the commentary events, that doing something like that was just like, because it was just kind of a lark to be like, we're going to show Castle Freak because I could get a film print and I could get just,
Yes, like
for
the
some
one
reason,
film
Alamo
print.
let me fly this guy out,
Yeah,
I don't know how
This was the titular Castle Freak.
Yeah,
Yes.
Giorgio,
And
yeah.
Who played Giorgio the Castle Freak. And yeah, it was amazing to have him there.
And he was a sweetheart. And like, I remember I
Nothing
drove
like the
Dan and Elliot.
character.
Yeah. I drove Dan and Elliot up there. It was in the middle of a snowstorm. And it was like, the theater was like half full. But he was such a sweetheart. And he had so many good stories about like the makeup effects and like just running around Charles Band's castle.
Yeah, so having an excuse to do something like that was definitely great. So yes, of course, if anyone's looking to book you guys, I sign off on you.
Aw.
Thank you.
Like that
I feel
time we did the Don't Tell Her It's Me screening and the print was in Italian.
Yeah, that's
And we
definitely
just
worth
rolled with
bringing
it.
up.
Yeah.
That's worth bringing up because it is such a funny detail that, when you get a film print, like normally you're checking it out and there's, we just didn't have the luxury of looking at stuff that far in advance. So we had only kind of put it on screen right before the show was about to start. And then, I was like, something is wrong here and realized it was dubbed in Italian. But luckily Matt had like a file or something. So we just like,
Yeah, he had it on the go.
yeah, luckily we didn't have
He had
to
a thumb
stream
drive with it.
Yeah.
but
Attached to his keychain.
yeah, such a weird
He
detail.
just always
but
happens to carry a thumb drive with "Don't Tell Her It's Me" on him at all
Yeah.
times.
And- in case of emergency, yeah. But that's a thing that I always think about now when I get a film print that I know probably hasn't screened in forever. Like, I'm always like, it might look good, but I want to see it on screen because it might be dubbed in Italian.
Yeah. We riffed in Italian.
Yeah.
So moving into more just general film programming, I think that this is sort of a dream job for a lot of movie nerds because there's something in the movie nerd DNA that makes us want to share movies we love or force them on people. Because I think the most annoying version of that is like me being like, Audrey, let's watch this, and her being like, I have my own things. But yours is sort of the best case scenario of that impulse. And I don't know, it seems like such a rarefied, great job. Like, how did you get here? Like, what led you here?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a thing that you automatically, like, no little girl is like, I want to grow up to be a programmer,
But I'm assuming a bunch of our listeners do want to be programmers.
Yeah, they might. But I think
So keep back a key piece of information so
yeah,
you don't have to fight
first
them.
of all, there's probably only like 100 of those jobs in the entire country. So, maybe think about, and all those people are going to do them until they die. So, don't pursue it.
It's like film criticism that way, where it's like, oh, I'd love to be a film reviewer. And it's like, okay, well, there's 10 people who do it, and they're
and they
never
get
going to
paid
go
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. Dan has a pretty good letterbox to everybody.
Yeah, and that
Funny.
draws in what?
I mean,
Yeah.
it's no Paul Schrader's letterbox, but still, yeah.
So yeah, I was actually kind of lucky. I was going to school for film in Florida, and it was sort of a vague degree I was pursuing in film studies. But we had a campus cinema, and when I first started going to school, the campus cinema was great. Like I actually had come up to see Pink Flamingos before I was even going to school there. I had seen Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, and then all of a sudden, it was something was off. And it's funny because this being sort of the 25th anniversary of The Mummy, this is like when I was programming. The Mummy showing in second run to me was like the epitome of the theater going downhill. It's so funny because I know it's kind of a classic now, but back then it was like, why are they showing The Mummy?
Mm-hmm.
And so I came to find that it was student run and that you could join this, this thing. And so I joined it probably my junior year. And then by my senior year, I became the director of the programming for that cinema. And, that's where I learned about working with distributors and getting catalogs. Like back then you would get sort of a printed catalog from the distributor, and you would book movies, and I would learn about booking 35 millimeter because that's basically all there. Maybe you could get a DVD or something.
So you took it over just in time to program The Mummy Returns.
The superior of the Mummy series.
I mean, it's crazy to think of that time because, it was like they came to us with a preview screening of this movie called Velvet Goldmine. And we were like, what is this thing,
Cool.
Yeah, so, and
There's
that's
no
also...
gold mine in this movie.
You're thinking of Gold with Roger Moore.
Yeah. Just the title sequence. I think about it a lot. Yeah.
So that's where I started to learn about programming, like, some for them, some for yourself, where you would, the idea was that you didn't want to lose money, but like you didn't want it to just be sort of like The Mummy in second run. So so that's kind of where I was learning about that. And when I moved to New York, I moved right after I graduated, and I wasn't really sure that programming was a job. Like I was kind of like, I had started by I was interning at Killer Films. I was thinking I was going to like devote myself to like indie productions. And that very quickly proved to just like be a terrible idea. So at the same time, I was volunteering with this collective called Ocularis that used to do screenings that were largely like experimental or local filmmaker things. And from them, I learned sort of about kind of building community and stuff like that. And then, I just was kind of like, wait, maybe this can, be a living. And it took a while and a lot of like volunteering and stuff, but eventually it proved to be something that I could actually get paid for,
Well, that leads into the next question because, of course, like we said, we first knew you at 92Y Tribeca, sort of followed you through the Alamo to Nighthawk, where Elliot's out of town, but occasionally Stuart and I will be have the pleasure of introducing something. We're there all the time.
Okay, because I was saying
you
half
guys
the
are there
Flophouse
more than me, I think.
I'm there all the time.
Half the Flophouse text chain is the two of you talking about the movie you just saw at Nighthawk together, or the movie you're about to go see at Nighthawk together. So,
or when we go on a hot dog date. Dan and I have a lot of fun. Okay,
that hot dog date really confused Elliot.
Yeah, because nobody explained anything about it to me. Just all you said was how you wiener-fied each other.
We wiener-fied our life, yeah.
Honestly, there's not much more to it than we got some hot dogs together.
But I got Dan to admit that a Chicago-style hot dog has value.
I was never a fan. Too many veggies for me. I was like, give me the unadorned hot dog with a little mustard and maybe some onions. But anyway. It was good.
He was singing a different tune after that wiener, let me tell you.
You're talking about Dog Day? Is that?
Yeah, we went to Dog Day afternoon, yeah. Right down the street from the Nighthawk.
Well, that I think that started out as a question about, are there other places sort of along the way that you were working as a programmer or that I missed in your...
It took some time. I like I said, I was doing the volunteer thing in New York with Ocularis. That was at a space called Galapagos, which was in Williamsburg on North 6.
I remember Galapagos, for sure.
And they were sort of like it was all volunteer run. And then, the thing is I moved to Boston for a few years. And so I was kind of trying to get something going there. And I had this job at this like women in film organization, which it was sort of, I was kind of the only employee and I worked with the board, but they let me do programming. And so I just would sort of do programming wherever I could because we didn't have a venue. So I would do programming at the library or in an outdoor garden or at a gallery. And then I also got a job with the Boston Jewish Film Festival. And that was sort of, like an assistant to the main programmer doing like watching submissions and stuff like that. And then, I moved back to New York and pretty much just got kind of lucky as, 92nd Street Y was going to open this venue in Tribeca and had posted this job that was like film related. So that was sort of like my trajectory over those years.
Just to interrupt, is there, outside of obviously scheduling really fun Flophouse related shows, do you have any like highlights from your careers? Like any screenings that you're particularly proud of for organizing?
Yeah. I mean, I know that Dan wanted to get there eventually, so I don't know if you want to just jump.
Oh, did I jump in there? Sorry.
Well, I don't know what the question was. There's one layer on that kind of relates to that, but you can answer now.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is that I remember a lot of the 92Y stuff, like, kind of most fondly. There was a show that we did where we invited Amy Sedaris to watch the 70s, like, drug scare movie Go Ask Alice.
Oh, wow.
It was, based on the sort of famous anonymous book. They had made a TV movie. And, I knew there was like this 16 millimeter print, and I was like, I want to show it. And I bet that she is into it because of Strangers with Candy. And it turns out she's like, yeah, we stole from that. And she was happy to come. And then because she came, the actress who was in the movie as like the main star, like, flew herself to New York. I think she had become like an interior designer to the stars or something, like, but she was like so psyched that Amy Sedaris was going to do this show. So she ended up coming. And so that was a really fun one because, Amy Sedaris was sitting behind me watching the movie and just like cracking up the whole time. And then we just kind of did a Q&A with them, which Tom Blunt had hosted. Yeah, there are so many other things that I've done over the years that were really fun. Even more recently at Nighthawk, doing this screening of Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 with the director Joe Berlinger was really great because, it was a movie that was like really obviously like disliked when it came out. And, Joe Berlinger was like a famous, documentary filmmaker. And this was his, foray into fiction. And the movie's actually got a lot of good stuff in it. It got taken away from him. And doing a screening like that because he came for the Q&A and he felt it was sort of cathartic for him. And like, I really like when when you invite a director and they're actually into it because, so many directors have to do so many Q&As and they're kind of over it. But, like he actually was like really like into revisiting it and feeling sort of like, it was like validated in some way.
That would have been interesting. I missed that screening, but I saw it for the first time recently. I knew that it was taken away from him, so it's not exactly what he would have wanted per se. But I feel like at the time, people were mad at it for not being the first movie. I'm like, well, that's a trick you can play once. Like I think it's interesting.
And the whole idea for him was to play on that.
Yeah, exactly.
That it wasn't going to be like that. Yeah, what else? I mean,
I remember. I think you programmed this, but it was a screening with Don Cascarelli. It was a screening of Phantasm and John Dies at the end, a double feature. And Don Cascarelli came out, and I was like so psyched. And in between screenings, I like went to go get an autograph on a Phantasm poster, and I was in line behind like dudes that were getting like Japanese VHS tapes of like Phantasm 2 autographed. I'm like, I can't measure up to these guys. They're too nerdy for me.
Yeah, I mean, I also, I got Hal Needham out for a screening.
Wow.
Which was really great. I think he died like only a year or two after that because I remember I was, switching over to Alamo.
You had nothing to do with his death.
Nothing, yeah. He hadn't seen me for years.
It
was a very slow acting poison, very slow.
Yeah, I mean, there's just kind of so many that it's sort of hard to pinpoint, but I feel lucky that I got to do any of it.
So if I can interrupt for a second, when you were programming at 92i Tribeca, it felt like such a special place, and I'm sure Nighthawk does now too. But I remember at that time, it felt like there was such a cool sense of community around there that you were creating with the way you were programming it. And like Kevin Marr would do his Kevin Geeks Out shows there, and we could do stuff there, and I was hosting my screening stuff, and Matt Xeni would do I Love Bad Movie stuff, and it felt like it was it became such a beautiful combination of like a theater that was showing really fun, interesting stuff, and like a clubhouse that like people really felt comfortable being at and hanging out at, and it was just great. There was one screening, I don't know if you remember, when we showed Little Murders, and Jules Pfeiffer came and talked about it afterwards. And it was amazing. I think about that all the time. It was such an amazing thing to get to talk to him and to have him there for that. It was so cool.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it was kind of miraculous because, again, we didn't pay anybody to do anything. So, getting people to come out just by me saying like, hey, we're showing this movie. Will you do this? And yeah, Little Murders is definitely one of the more memorable ones too.
That was amazing. And I do remember that one of the first things you said to me, I think when I met you, when we first started talking about me hosting something there, you were like, by the way, we don't pay any money. And I was like, you were like, if you really demanded it, maybe we could come up with some kind of like very small honorarium. And me being a young, dumb person, I was like, but you don't need to pay me money to do it. I don't even want that. As opposed to being like, yeah, give me whatever I can get, you know.
I mean, it was crazy because when I first started the job, I was kind of like, what's my budget? And they were like, well, nothing. And I was like, well, but I have to pay for films, like to, you know, you have to pay for film rights and to get films. And they were like, but we're a nonprofit. And I was like, that doesn't matter. So, I mean, that's the thing. Even in that small room, you know, if we were paying for film rights and film shipping, we were not breaking even, you know, so there's not even like we were raking it in and just like not sharing money. It just like, it just didn't break even, you know?
You did a great job of shielding, I think, the people doing shows and hosting things there from all of that, stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of ridiculous, you know, but yeah, eventually, like, you know, when I got to Alamo, it was like, yes, I could pay people. So I tried to continue working with whoever I had worked with so that, you know, there was some compensation finally.
We did, and I feel like one of the first shows we did up in Yonkers was the Flophouse Prom, where we rented a couple of buses to take people from Charlene's up to Yonkers and then back.
That. Yeah. Is that Sleepwalkers?
It might have been Sleepwalkers.
I think it was Sleepwalkers. That was really fun.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, we've had like arguably bigger successes since then, but to me, like that was like the peak of like where we've rented 2 buses, like school buses. We're like taking people up to
garbage bags with ice and Coors Light in them and put them in the back of the bus.
And guess what? You're going on an expenses paid trip to Yonkers.
Beautiful Yonkers, as immortalized in Hello Dolly, as a place you want to leave.
Or anyway. In Lost in Yonkers, a place you can get lost in. Yeah.
This is kind of a broad question, but after so many years, do you have like an idea of like what like audiences respond to, like get people out? Like what puts butts in seat? What's like the hook, whether it's like something beyond the movie or just a certain type of thing?
She's going to say Deadpool. She's just going to say Deadpool, Dan.
Listeners, if you notice, that's also the second question Dan has asked that involves putting butts in seats. I think we detect a theme there for Dan.
I mean, it's kind of hard to say, you know, like for me, it's like, I feel like if I'm excited about something, somebody else is bound to be excited about it. So that's sort of the first approach, you know, like I'm somebody who abhors marketing and like, I hate the idea that you have to figure out how to market something. I feel like if it's just good, like people will figure it out and come. So yeah, when it comes to hooks, you know, like for a time I was doing things like sing-alongs and stuff like that. And I think that was really appealing, and having movies that have like a nostalgic value is, you know, is nice. But it, you know, I think the bottom line is that it has to be something that just seems fun or interesting, you know, like I don't want to think about like, oh, people are going to be excited because, you know, they're going to like have a food special or something, you know, like that's sort of not the line of thinking that I like to be on.
Well, we're going to take a little break to talk about Flop TV Season 2 and possibly a couple of other things, and we'll be back in just a little bit.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy.
I'm Oscar.
I'm Dimitri. And we are the Eurovangelists.
We're a weekly podcast spreading the word of the Eurovision Song Contest, the most important music competition in the world.
Maybe you already heard Glenn Weldon of NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour talk up our coverage of this year's contest. But what do we talk about in the off-season?
The rest of Eurovision, duh. There are nearly 7 decades of pop music history to cover.
We've got thousands of amazing songs, inspiring competitors, and so much drama to discuss. And let me tell you, the drama is juicy.
Plus, all the gorillas and bread-baking grandmas that make Eurovision so special.
Check out Eurovangelists, available everywhere you get podcasts, and you could be a Eurovangelist too.
Ooh, I want to be one.
You already are. It's that easy.
Oh, okay, cool.
Most of the plants humans eat are technically grass.
Most of the asphalt we drive on is almost a liquid.
The formula of WD-40 is San Diego's greatest secret.
Zippers were invented by a Swedish immigrant love story.
On the podcast Secretly Incredibly Fascinating, we explore this type of amazing stuff.
Stuff about ordinary topics like cabbage and batteries and socks.
Topics you'd never expect to be the title of the podcast. Secretly Incredibly Fascinating.
Find us by searching for the word secretly in your podcast app.
And at MaximumFun.org.
Hey, it's Dan popping in here with a word from our sponsors and some words from us. So please don't skip all of it or any of it. Who knows? Hey, we're sponsored in part this week by Factor. When the weather's been this hot, you don't want to do a lot of cooking, so why not use Factor's no prep, no mess meals that are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from each week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. You can make your day delicious, a delicious day from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. There are options here. People choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat a well-balanced diet. I've talked about it before. I'm a fan of cooking. You may have seen one of the Slop House Twitch streams that I do with Stuart on occasion where I cook a meal. Stuart makes some cocktails. Love to cook, but I don't love to cook all the time. And I have a high standard for what I eat. So it was kind of surprising to me, honestly, that I really liked these Factor meals that I sampled. And they're really convenient for those times when you're just tired. You just don't want to do it. So head over to factormeals.com/learn50 and use code learn50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code learn50 at factormeals.com/learn50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. And now the Flophouse business. We've promoted Flop TV a lot, so I'll make it short. From September 2024, that is this year, to February 2025, that is early next. On the first Saturday of each month, we are going to be broadcasting live with a series of shows about bad movie sequels. These will be video streams, ticketed video streams. If you go to theflophouse.simpletix.com, you can get individual show tickets for $7 plus fees, or $35 for the whole season, which is the equivalent of getting an extra episode for free. Well, not an extra episode, just one of the 6 episodes. And the shows will all stay up, available to watch on demand until the end of February. So if you want to catch up later in the run, you can get a season pass at any point during the Flop TV run and get access to everything you missed in the past. So again, more details and tickets are available at theflophouse.simpletix.com. And if you want to know about stuff like this, but also our side projects, plus some silly extra writing that I throw in there, and get that in your inbox a couple of times a month, why not hop over to flophousepodcast.com and put your email in the email box on the front page so you can get our newsletter, Flop Secrets. And also, on top of that, I have my own newsletter that I launched a little ways back now called Dan McCoy's Special Interests, named after the tendency for neurodivergent people to have interests that they hyper-focus on, a group I only learned I was a member of myself late in life. And over there, I write a couple of installments per month that are a combination of pop culture commentary, personal essay, and, of course, humor. So if you're curious to read those, you can sign up for that over at danmccoyinterests.com. Now, let us get back to the show. And we're back with Cristina Cacioppo, Nighthawk programmer.
I love, Dan, that you said, we'll be back, and then we'll be back, as if the ads are not also done by us.
Yeah. I mean, specifically, probably me. But, I don't know. It's a convention of the form.
Maybe you'll do a silly voice.
Yeah.
You'll play
Maybe
one of
I'll be
those
French.
characters. Because you're a man who has a lot of different characters.
Oh, yeah.
Character voices, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Dan, do one of your
Attentional voice acting, casting directors.
Dan, do one of your
Dan's
favorite
available.
famous characters.
Hey, it's me, the guy who talks like this. I don't really have another hook. It's just that I talk like this. I really talk about pretty normal things like tax breaks that you can get, or city planning.
Oh shit!
But
I just got an
What?
email from DreamWorks Animation. Now, normally they only hire big name stars to play these roles, but I feel like they want to take a chance with you.
Oh, wait,
Dan.
Stuart, you haven't responded yet. So they're texting me, and they said they want to do at least a 4-film franchise for Guy Who Talks Like This.
Well, that's great. So getting back.
Dan very casually dismisses the offer of a lifetime.
Yeah. Steve Carell will take it, I guess.
Yeah. I'll franchise it out. My real passion is asking questions here on the Flophouse, and the next one is this one. Cristina, some people love Q&As with filmmakers, but even though I've seen some great ones that I have enjoyed, I always kind of dread them because they are so dependent on the speakers being good and engaging, and the audiences not getting up and doing a lot of comments that are rather than questions. Do you have tips for good Q&As? Like, what do you think heads off those issues?
Yeah, I mean, let me say that I agree with you. I tend to kind of be the person that's like running out before the Q&A. Like I'm not usually, and it has to be just sort of like the most exciting thing, which recently one that I went to was the new Lee Daniels movie. Lee Daniels was in conversation with Bradley Cooper. So I feel like that sort of stunt moderators maybe is a tip. Yeah, I think for me, it's like, the moderator should mostly let the director or cast do the talking. Like
That's not how I do it.
When a
I'm
moderator
moderating.
is talking too much, it's it's kind of like, you don't want to hear from that person. You want to hear from the talent. And if they're kind of stalling, because sometimes you do get talent who maybe aren't necessarily like that psyched about it. I think it's just like making sure that you know the movie and you're not asking the most generic questions. We do this shorts festival at Nighthawk, and
Everybody wears shorts.
yes, everybody wears shorts. And I've actually gotten complimented on my questioning, because I think all these shorts filmmakers go to other festivals where like people are just kind of like, tell us why you made this. And I actually try to sit down and write something like very tailored to each movie, because like otherwise it's just kind of like, this Q&A, it'll be like there's like 10 people and you have 20 minutes. So you're kind of going down the line, and it has to be, pretty compact.
Yeah.
But, people have complimented me that I put a lot of thought into it. And I think that's part of it too, is like, just, the questions to avoid, like, don't ask about if it was improvised. Don't ask about the budget. Don't ask if, if they'll read your script, especially if you're the moderator. And then, try to keep the audience questions to a minimum.
Slip them the script.
Does this
backstage.
haircut work for my face?
Yes.
That would be I would be so interested in that question if someone asked that.
There was this question reminds me of a thing that Stuart and I witnessed, which was not at one of Christina's venues, but this was at we went to see when Only God Forgives came out. It was Nicholas Winding Refn and
Premiere at BAM.
And why am I forgetting the name?
It was the whole cast,
He's a
and
huge
Ryan
star.
Gosling was up there, and
Yes.
Winding Refn, and the only native English speaker was Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, and it was, and
Even the moderator, I think, was French, maybe.
I think so. And there were two moments that always stuck with me, and one was when a guy got up and he goes, as a young aspiring filmmaker myself, do you have any advice? And the audience just started booing him, booing the questioner, because they did not want to hear it. But then Winding Refn had a really good answer to it. And then someone said, I wanted to ask Ryan Gosling, is there any role that you would like to play that you haven't gotten to play yet? And he just goes, Freddy Krueger, and that was his whole answer. And the audience went crazy.
Lost their mind. Like people were like tearing their hair off their heads.
Yeah, I mean that guy's just bred to be an entertainer. Like he just knows what he's doing.
I don't have a lot of regrets in my life, but one of them is that I didn't wait in that long line to get my picture taken with Ryan Gosling. Screening.
He was just famous enough that like it would have been cool to do it, but it wasn't impossible. Yeah.
So it's my impression from talking with you that you rewatch the prints before you screen them to check various things. Are you ever like, ugh, I thought this was going to be good. Like I had an impression of like oh, I liked this, and now rewatching it, I'm not wild about screening this thing.
All the time.
Really?
I mean, I think it's more of like a self-doubt thing where I'm like, oh, it's not like, do I like this? It's like, oh, is the audience going to be into this? Like, am I crazy that this is good? You know, and it'll just sort of be self-doubt. And that's even in the room sometimes, you know, like, because I do watch things in advance, maybe not necessarily the film print itself, but, you know, because I'll write the synopses or, you know, or something like that. So, but yeah, it's sometimes that, or then in the room where I'm kind of like, are people enjoying this? I can't tell, you know?
I have to say that I forget the details of it, but when we screened the Boyfriend School, aka Don't Tell Her It's Me, recently, like I don't know whether it's Stockholm syndrome, like affection over time, but like watching it with a crowd, like that movie played so well that I'm like,
people were loving it.
Maybe it's good actually. And there's a guy afterwards. He was from like Australia or something. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Like there's
the guy
a
with like the mullet and like the tank top, and he was there on a date.
The actual Lobo Merengue was there.
He seemed like it like that. It was definitely sort of like that. But yeah, he was sitting in the row in front of me and he was loving it. Like he was losing his mind. And after he's like, you know, I just came here randomly, like on a date. Like that movie was really good. And it was just like so deeply into it. And yeah, you're right. The crowd, because I think that is one where I was like, you know, especially comedies sometimes. It's like you just never know. And it really played so well.
Yeah, it could have been like the 4 or 5 drinks I'd had, but man, that movie rocked.
I had the opposite experience of that in a screening last year or the year before. I was involved in a riff screening of the movie Rotor, the RoboCop ripoff, and I think that movie is hilarious. It's just the way it's made is so funny. And then watching it with a bunch of people and them all hating it and being so bored, and me being like, "But isn't it funny the way they did this? Like this whole scene, you never hear what the characters are saying. It's just a montage of them eating a meal together with music over it." And they,
I think so much of that, Elliot, honestly, is people like us who have seen so many movies end up valuing like such weird things in movies just because it's like, of course, if you're a quote unquote normie, you're like, I just want a good movie that I'm going to enjoy and everyone can agree it's good. And like, that's my movie that I saw this year and we're going to have fun. Whereas we're like, yeah, what weird texture is in this thing?
Yeah.
I feel that too. And I think the new sort of element in the Letterboxd age is that sometimes, against my better judgment, I'll look to see if people review and, you know, like, and just to kind of see the reaction. And, you know, sometimes people even review like my intros, which can be like really like upsetting. But I mean, I just can't help myself. Usually I just want to see what people have to say about
people
the movie.
Say mean shit about women on the internet. This is the first I'm hearing about this.
I recently discovered in Letterboxd that I could search our names within the reviews.
Whoops.
That was when I sent you those things. They were all it was all nice stuff. It was more like, oh, Flophouse sent me here. This is good. You know, like I'm interested in this thing.
Oh, here's another way for me to judge my worth online. Great.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna make a habit of it.
Dan, has Letterboxd added a DM feature for you yet?
No.
So you
a Dan
DM
McCoy
all your
feature?
Yeah, that's funny. So this is a sort of a broader thing. Thoughts about curation in general, because, and here is where I'm going to make a question that's more of a comment for a long part of it, but we'll get around to a question.
Cool.
Which is, I sort of feel like the world was steering away from curation for a while because there are a couple reasons. One, it was often self-proclaimed experts who are curating these things that looked kind of like, say, the Flophouse, like a bunch of
names, Dan McCoy.
Bunch
Don't
of
be
white
a coward.
men being like, this is a thing that's important, and it could be sort of toxic gatekeeping in its worst form. And two, the emergence of the algorithm and the idea of like, okay, well, like computers will figure out what I want and deliver it to me. But I feel like there's sort of more of a resurgence of curation and people appreciating that human beings have all this knowledge and will sort of serve you a thing that they find interesting. I guess the question, which is not much of one, is like, Do you agree with that sort of road we've taken, or not? And like, what are your thoughts about curation as a thing?
I mean, at the theater, it's necessary. You know, when you have a streaming service and just sort of like a library, and like maybe the algorithm is a thing, but you know, I've never found that any algorithms on any streaming service like deliver me, save for maybe Tubi, which is obviously the exception
Tubi's
to everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, curation I think is important, and especially in you know, if we didn't have that for movie theaters, you know, you would just end up showing you know, it's like studios will send you like a list of their DCPs and be like, here's a combo drive that has like Forrest Gump, and you know, I mean, I'm bringing that up
man,
again.
that's like a DVD like 3-pack that you'd get at the gas station. You're like, okay, I guess I'll watch.
Well, I mean, this sort of happened actually. Like, you know, movie theaters closed for COVID lockdown, and when they opened, you were able to rent a theater like for a private party, but it was like you could choose from these 10 movies, and like Forrest Gump was one of them. So yeah, I feel like when it comes, you know, that's the idea, is that you want people who are diverse. And so, you know, when I've done screenings, like, you know, I'm one person of one type, but, you know, I also invite other people to pick movies because maybe they'll pick something that's outside of my wheelhouse because of their different background. And I think that's kind of an important part of it too, is to make sure that if there's, you know, if you sort of have your lane, to bring other people in who maybe have like a more expansive knowledge or a more particular thing that you maybe like haven't, you know, you've overlooked for whatever reason.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask was, knowing that you are so committed to as much as you can showing movies on film, although you were saying, I think earlier before we were on, we were recording, that you're loosening up on that. But because of that, like, are there any sort of white whales of movies that you've wanted to screen and have never been able to because you're like, ugh, there's no way to get a print of this thing?
There are, you know,
The Day the Clown Cried.
That kind of changes over the years, you know, because there have been things that I've found. There's also been things that used to be available and aren't anymore, and that gets super frustrating. That there was like a time that I was able to show something like Heavenly Creatures, like is now there's not a film print of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that because of it's unavailable, or they've just deteriorated and they haven't struck a new one?
So there was kind of like libraries change hands sometimes when they're not, you know, if it's not just Universal or Warner Brothers, like there are these libraries like Miramax and things like that where the libraries kind of move, and like I don't think that they account for the inventory, or the new distributor just doesn't care enough to like look into it. So it's a number of things, you know, or the prints get damaged or go missing or something like that. The movies that I've sort of been like for a long time, the one that I've been after is this French movie called Don't Deliver Us from Evil from 1971. That's like this like evil teenage girl type of movie.
Sounds a lot like Heavenly Creatures.
It's kind of based on the same true story, actually.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean, when I'm talking about my lane and my wheelhouse, it is like specifically teenage girls who kill people type of movies. But yeah, I think I once tracked down a print that was maybe in France, but like it was a bad print, and you know it would be expensive to ship overseas. There's this movie called Thief of Hearts, which isn't the best movie, but it stars Stephen Bauer. If you know who that is, he's that's his like stage name. He's the Cuban from Scarface, like the cousin character or whatever, like super so this is like a 1980s movie where, you know, it's just sort of an erotic thriller of sorts. And then it's kind of topical, but you know, I'm doing a series with the director John McNaughton, who did Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer and Wild Things. And he did this movie called The Borrower.
What a career. Just those two alone.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, the reason I'm doing it is because he has this body of work that has kind of been overlooked, and including this movie called The Borrower, which is sort of a sci-fi movie he did in the early 90s. And, you know, when I first talked to him, he was like, if you could find a film print of this, because, you know, basically it had a little life at the Music Box in Chicago, because that's where he's from. And he told me that, you know, when they were done with it, they were like, we have this film print. Do you want it? And he's like, I didn't feel like it was mine, so I said no. And now there's no film print.
Yeah.
So he was like, if you could find it. And I tried actually. And the only thing I could find was the Library of Congress
with Ray Don Chong in it.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
awesome.
great cast. Antonio Vargas.
Yeah.
There's a copyright print at the Library of Congress, but that's like unloanable.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of other stuff like lately, I mean, maybe forever, but I get really deep into these like direct-to-video action movies that I believe have film prints. So there's like this director Joseph Merhi who had PM Entertainment was his his production company, and it's all just like a lot of cheap like LA action movies. And I'm like, I know that there are film prints of this somewhere.
I feel like I know that name. Like, what are some of the?
I'm trying to think of like what would be the thing that you would know, because it was actually like a very recent discovery for me where I was like, how did I not know about this guy? A lot of these are on Merhi. Yeah. Spartan is a good one. A lot of them there's a bunch that star Wings Hauser, the Sweepers.
Oh, I recommended Last Man Standing,
Yes.
the non Arthur Hiller last name,
Yes.
or Walter Hill.
Walter Hill?
Walter
yeah,
Hill,
yeah.
Either way. I recommended that because
Don't die on that hill, Dan.
Tom screened that in person for friends, and it was
Friend of the Flophouse, Tom Sylvester.
Yeah, it was so much fun, that movie.
There's a lot like the Sweeper you should watch that has C. Thomas Howell and like Jeff Fahey.
Jeff Fahey.
But I just have I'm like
Body Parts, Jeff Fahey.
and even
The Lawnmower
Doppelganger
Man.
and other movies by that director Avi Nesher, like this one
Yeah.
Time Bomb, like things that it's not like they were like in wide circuit on 35 millimeter, but I'm like, I know they're out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's the amazing thing about film prints is like, and I'm sure this is something you come up against, or it maybe is beneficial a lot in this kind of programming, is like film prints, like they seem to have this mercurial existence where they are either disappeared and deteriorating, or they're turning up in places that you wouldn't expect. And so, like, I feel like there was this period where every 5 years they suddenly found a new print of Metropolis that had more footage in it than was available before. And I was just listening to a thing not too long ago about how there are these film archives in Eastern Europe that have original release, potentially versions of the Marx Brothers movies with stuff that was cut out from the prints for re-releases, and which we don't have anymore. And it's just, there's all these prints floating around the world everywhere, and there's just no systemized way to handle them, and there's no money for someone to go and actually look at everything. And so there's
you need
constant
someone who
discoveries to be made.
cares. I think that like one thing that I was chasing for a long time was the movie Trancers, the Charles Band movie.
Hell yeah.
And it took somebody at Full Moon caring enough to look to find it. And so this one guy just finally cared, and he found the print, and I was able to show it. And that's another one that I think now you maybe can't really get to. I mean, it's like that, and even like people are always like, every once in a while someone's like, I want to do a Bollywood series. And I'm like, there's no repertory for Bollywood. Like those movies, they just get cranked out. And then like, there has to be, it's like, did they really destroy? If you imagine all the film prints that existed, like where did they go? Are they just landfill,
It's amazing how much of this stuff that is objectively has a financial value to it just either got thrown away or mislabeled or misshelled, just not taken care of and not organized. It's just really, and maybe it's just because I come from a long line of librarians, but the idea that like a company makes a thing and they're just like, throw it in the room, and it's in cans that are not labeled and things like that. And it's just crazy to me.
Or like, just be like, let's delete it. Let's tape over it. No one cares. You know?
Well, that's the BBC way of doing things. Is you're like, it's expensive to buy videotape. Let's tape over Dudley Moore and Peter Cook's television show. No one will ever want to watch it again. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, before we finish, I'd like to highlight Ridiculous Sublime, a series we've mentioned a lot on the Flophouse because Stuart and I have gone to multiple installments, either together or not. These
Sometimes
are movies
eating
that's
hot dogs
guaranteed
also.
entertainment right there. Guaranteed entertainment.
These are movies that aren't necessarily, they aren't quote unquote bad, but I do think that they're kind of what people who listen to the Flophouse, like bad movie nuts, really want to see a lot of the time is movies where what is good about them, what genuinely works, is sort of inexorably tied to also what is maybe silly about them, and they wouldn't be better if they were like better. So they walk this line. And what do you look for when you're programming that? Like, what is your sort of criteria for that.
I think
criterion.
that, you know, if I've watched something and haven't seen it with an audience, like there's sometimes when I'll watch or rewatch a movie and be like, I want to see this with a crowd, you know? And, or just for me, you know, my personal enjoyment is just like when there's something that makes my jaw drop because it's just like, it's just something I've never seen before. Or, you know, like when I finally watched Dreamcatcher, like there's so much in that movie that I was just like whose idea was this? Like, where did this come
Stephen
from?
King and
You know,
drugs.
it's like just knowing that somebody like made their own rules or like just like didn't care about like what the sort of status quo was. That's usually what does it for me. It's like I don't think about it as being good or bad. I'm just like somebody took a swing here, and I'm glad they did. And it might not make any sense, and it maybe didn't make any money, and it maybe like lost people jobs. But
what would have been some of the Ridiculous Sublime movies? So like The Ambulance we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was a fucking banger.
Saw that. We saw Prison.
Yep. Was the Manitou part of that?
Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
It better be. If you're going to show the Manitou, you better put it in the Ridiculous Sublime series.
Is that the one you described as being the worst print you've ever shown?
Yeah, because I've shied away from showing like stuff from the 70s because, you know, the usual rule is that it was like anything from 82 or before is probably faded just based on the film stock that they used. Yeah, I mean, I started this series, you know, by now it was like over 2 years ago with Action Jackson. And I think for me, part of this was, you know, the idea for the series is that I wanted to encompass action movies, which are some of my favorite things. And, you know, any other type of thing that could fit into that. I wanted there to be sort of a broad, you know, like I didn't want to narrow it down to just action movies. I had also, you know, been doing this erotic thriller series, and that felt sort of too narrow. So yeah, it started with Action Jackson, which is, you know, it's just like a ton of fun, like just like completely over the top, just like, you know, total nonsense, like crazy stunts, all that, you know?
It's one of the few movies that feels like it lives up to the ridiculousness of its title.
Yeah.
In that kind, where they clearly the title seems to have come first before anything else. And they were like, how do we earn the name Action Jackson?
Yes, exactly.
That erotic thriller series was great. And it sort of, you were sort of right in tune with the pulse because I feel like you were programming
Dance
it, and
pulse.
then there was but then there's like this sort of cultural like reassessment and like enjoyment of the erotic thriller. Like hey, like people discovered it again.
People were like, wait, there can be sex in movies? What?
I don't think so. But there's that one with Banderas and was it Rebecca De Mornay? That one is so
Yeah, and
wild.
I mean that, you know, that could have been in Ridiculous to Sublime as well, you know. Yeah, I missed doing that series. It didn't get as much of an audience as I would have liked. You know, like some obviously did better than others. And I did really enjoy, you know, I would do this bingo game that was just sort of like, you know, erotic thriller tropes or whatever. But yeah, I Ridiculous to Sublime kind of fit more, you know, just was a better umbrella. And, you know, I was glad to also fit more comedies, like doing The Boyfriend School as part of that. You know, it just works, you know?
As we close out, I don't know how far ahead you can say, but like what's up for Ridiculous Sublime in the future?
I've got Poltergeist 3 coming up.
Ooh.
The Jean-Claude Van Damme hockey movie, Sudden Death.
Oh,
that's one of my brother's favorites.
Baby.
And, you know, actually, my first experiment in doing something just kind of digitally, Turbulence. Are you guys familiar with the Ray Liotta?
Yes,
yeah.
Of course.
It's a Christmas movie, everybody. So I'm trying to do that in December. And yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's, you know, it might not be as good as Turbulence 3 Heavy Metal. But
that's what I was gonna say. It's one of those movies that was mildly successful, but then went on to spawn a bunch of direct-to-video sequels. Turbulence 3 is a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
Turbulence 3 is a lot of fun too. I'm confused, Dan. Which Turbulence is this?
Well, we'll explain off mic. We should close up because we've talked Christina's ear off. She was nice enough to come to my apartment and sit between Stuart and I in this hot room.
Truly an incredible cost to have to pay to get her message out.
Yeah, well, I mean, she also lives in the neighborhood. It's not that.
Wow.
Don't dox her, Dan. What are you doing?
Yeah.
People don't know where I am, I hope. Anyway, I would like to thank Cristina so much for being here. This was really interesting. I would like to thank our producer, Alex Smith. Howell Doughty is the name he goes by on the internet. I'm wearing one of his shirts right now, but it's blocked by
Why don't you
the microphone.
do a
So we
turn,
probably
Dan?
And most
can't
people are listening
see
to
it
this
on
too,
the-
so they won't.
Well,
there's no way to see it.
Describe the garment. So
Alex does
it
little-
fits perfectly.
Alex
Mhm.
does little videos for us. So
What kind of cotton blend is it?
It's a pretty heavy shirt, actually, as t-shirts go. But if you like that
Talking
sort of like
Gildan?
bulkier style, I would recommend it. The design's great. Anyway, so Alex, thank you for being our producer. Thank you for making shirts.
Yeah, thank you for being a friend.
As long as we're thanking people, before Cristina goes, I want to say, Cristina, thank you so much for the work you've been doing for years now, showing movies to people that they wouldn't have otherwise seen, they might not have heard of, they might not have known existed. And I know that for one of the things I regret about not living in New York anymore is that I don't have access to the stuff that you're showing, because over the years, there were so many things that I saw because you programmed it that really meant a lot to me and that opened my eyes a lot. And it's just, I think you're doing something that you enjoy doing, but what you're also doing is it's just great. It's spreading kind of new things to people and inspiring them in ways that I don't know if you are fully aware of. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you, Elliot. And I also miss having you around to host stuff. So you gotta come back sometime.
Maybe someday I'll come back and I'll be like, here I am, Nighthawk, and now you're gonna watch Scanners. I don't know. What movie's gonna be, but-
Wow.
Maybe
okay.
Scanners 3.
Heck yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening. We'll close up this mini for the Flophouse. I've been Dan McCoy.
I've been Stuart Wellington.
I've been Elliot Kalin, now sinking into the earth rather than floating into the air.
And our special guest has been
Cristina Cacioppo. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
supported
directly
by you.